You'll die poor and alone. That's what my daughter-in-law said across the dinner table, her voice calm but her smile cutting like a knife. Everyone heard it. My son looked down at his plate. No one defended me. I sat there, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside something broke. I went home that night and sat in the dark, replaying her words over and over. Poor and alone. That's how she saw me. That's how my own son let her see me. But she didn't know who she was talking to. She didn't know what I still had, or what I was about to do. That night, I made a decision, and when they came back into my life, thinking I was weak, they had no idea what was waiting for them. Stay with me. You're going to want to hear how this ends. It was a cold morning in Portland when the letter arrived. The sky was gray and heavy, the kind of winter light that made everything look quiet and tired. I had just made my tea and was standing by the window, watching the river move slowly through the fog. When I saw the gold envelope with Daniel's name on it, my heart did a small twist. I already knew it wasn't really from him. It was from her, from Vanessa. The envelope was thick, fancy, and smelled faintly of perfume. I opened it carefully, already guessing what I would find inside. Join us for an intimate family dinner to celebrate Daniel's 39th birthday. The handwriting was perfect, of course. The words looked polite, even warm, but at the bottom there it was. Her little note written in smaller letters. Smart casual, please don't overdress. I just stared at it for a moment. Then I laughed, a quiet, tired laugh. It wasn't funny, but what else could I do? That line wasn't a reminder, it was a message. A message that said, don't try too hard. Don't try to be one of us. I set the card down on the kitchen table and took a deep breath. The room was cold. I looked over at the picture of Richard, my husband, sitting beside the old lamp. If you were here, I said quietly, maybe they'd still remember who taught them what respect means. The clock ticked behind me. I stood there for a long moment holding my tea, thinking about Daniel. He hadn't called in months. When he did, it was always quick. He'd say he was busy, that work was stressful, that Vanessa was planning something important. It had been years since he came over just to see me. Now he was turning 39, and I was getting a golden invitation with a note telling me how to dress. Vanessa always liked control, how people looked, how they spoke, how they fit into her world. I was never part of that world, not really. She made sure of it. For a moment I thought about throwing the invitation away, pretend I never saw it. But that would be exactly what she wanted. No, I wasn't going to disappear just because she thought I didn't belong. I'd go, and I'd sit there, and I'd watch. I'd see just how far she was willing to go this time. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. The smell of cedar and old fabric hit me. I hadn't worn most of my clothes since Richard passed. At the very back hung a navy blue dress with small pearl buttons, his favorite. I ran my fingers over it. It felt soft and warm, like something from another life. I took it out and laid it on the bed. Vanessa would hate it. It wasn't modern or minimal. It was classic, real. It made me feel like myself again. I smiled for the first time that morning. Later, I went downtown to get my hair done. The salon was almost empty, the kind of quiet you only hear on weekday mornings. Jenna, the stylist, smiled when she saw me. It's been a while, Mrs. Walker. What's the occasion? My son's birthday, I said. She nodded, working her hands through my silver hair. Big celebration? Something like that. She kept talking about color and trends while I watched myself in the mirror. My face looked older, but there was something new in my eyes, something sharper. When she was done, I almost didn't recognize myself. The gray wasn't dull anymore. It was silver. It looked strong. You look beautiful, she said. Thank you, I told her. I think I just remembered who I am. On the drive home, I thought about Daniel as a boy. He used to run into my arms after school, his little backpack bouncing, his face full of life. He used to say, Mom, you're my favorite person. I remember the sound of his laugh, how proud Richard used to be watching him grow. I didn't know when that boy disappeared. Somewhere along the line, Vanessa taught him that love had conditions. That family was just another way to keep score. I parked the car and sat there for a minute, watching the rain slide down the windshield. I took the invitation out of my bag and looked at it again. The gold edges caught the light. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. I went inside and placed it back on the kitchen table next to Richard's picture. My hands trembled slightly when I set it down. I looked at it one last time before whispering, I'll go, But this time I won't just sit there. That evening I made myself dinner, a small bowl of soup, and turned on the lamp beside me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I tried reading, but my mind kept drifting to what Vanessa might have planned. She was never spontaneous. Everything she did had a reason behind it. If she invited me, it was because she wanted to make a point. The last time we were together, she made a joke about my apartment. "It's cozy," she said, with that smile that never reached her eyes. "Very humble." Daniel laughed a little, then stopped when he saw my face. She always pushed just enough to hurt, but not enough to look cruel. This invitation was the same thing, a smile with sharp edges. Before going to bed, I took the card one last time and read it again. I could almost hear her voice in my head. "Smart casual, please don't overdress." That little phrase sat in my mind like a splinter. I turned off the light and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just tired of being treated like a background character in my own family. But as I closed my eyes, something changed. I remembered the files in Richard's old briefcase, the ones I hadn't touched since the funeral, the accounts, the deeds, the things no one knew about. Maybe I didn't have to stay quiet anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't know it then, but that single piece of paper, cream-colored, gold-edged, and full of fake warmth, was the start of everything that followed. It was the moment I stopped being afraid of being left out and started remembering what I still had left. The Skyline Terrace was the kind of restaurant people went to just to be seen. Warm lights, marble floors, waiters in crisp suits, and a view of the city that looked like something out of a magazine. I stood at the entrance for a moment, feeling the heat rise to my face. It wasn't nerves. It was that quiet awareness that I didn't belong there, at least not in their eyes. Daniel waved me over from across the room. He looked good. Too good, maybe. The perfect son, the perfect husband. Vanessa was next to him, glowing under the golden lights, her phone already held up like a mirror she couldn't stop staring into. "Mom," she said brightly as I reached the table, her voice full of sugar and static. "You made it. Say hi to my followers." She turned the phone toward me, her camera already rolling. "And here's my mother-in-law. She's our vintage charm tonight." Her friends laughed off camera. The sound was soft but sharp. I smiled anyway. That polite kind of smile you give when you know it's being recorded. "Hello," I said quietly. Vanessa laughed, still looking into the screen. "Isn't she adorable? Always so classic." I sat down slowly, my hand steady even though my heart wasn't. Daniel didn't meet my eyes. He adjusted his cufflink, his face tight. I wanted him to say something, to tell her to stop, but he didn't. The waiter came, all polished and professional. Vanessa ordered wine like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "We'll have the Chateau Margaux," she said, then glanced at me with a smirk. "Unless that's too much, Mom?" I met her eyes. "It sounds lovely." Her smile faltered for half a second before she turned back to the waiter. "Perfect, thank you." Dinner started quiet enough. Vanessa talked about her new brand deal, about the trip to Italy they were planning, about the house they might buy. She didn't ask about me, and I didn't expect her to. Daniel nodded at all the right times, smiled when he was supposed to, and pretended not to notice the way his wife's words sliced through me. I tried to eat, but every bite felt heavy. I caught the waiter's eye once when he refilled my water. His expression was kind, concerned. He leaned down slightly and whispered, "Are you all right, ma'am?" I smiled, small but real. "I've survived worse," I said. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. People like him saw everything. Halfway through dinner, Vanessa started another live stream. She shifted the camera, framing the table just right. "Family dinner night," she said cheerfully. "Work-life balance, right? Even influencers need it." Her friends commented in the stream, and she laughed, pretending it was all harmless fun. Then she panned the camera toward me again. "And this is Eleanor, my sweet mother-in-law. She's our reminder that elegance never goes out of style." Her followers filled the chat with heart emojis and fake compliments. I sat still, holding my fork, smiling just enough. I wondered if they noticed the look in her eyes, how empty it was. Daniel stayed quiet. He drank his wine, cut his steak, checked his phone once. The space between us felt colder than the winter air outside. When dessert came, Vanessa announced, "No cake tonight, we're watching carbs." She laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I sipped my tea and stayed silent. There was nothing to say. When the check arrived, she reached for it dramatically, then stopped. "Oh, Mom," she said softly. "Next time you can just send your love, okay? These places aren't really your vibe." It wasn't cruel in her tone, it was worse. It was pity dressed as kindness. I looked at her, then at Daniel. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. My throat felt dry, but my voice came out steady. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm learning new vibes every day." She smiled, satisfied, and turned back to her phone. I stood a few minutes later, telling them I'd go first. Vanessa kissed the air beside my cheek. "Drive safe, Mom," she said, already scrolling. Daniel gave me a quick hug that lasted less than a second. The elevator ride down felt endless. The sound of laughter from the restaurant echoed behind me, soft and distant. I stepped outside into the cold night. The city lights were bright, sharp, almost too much to look at. I walked toward the parking lot, each step heavy but clear. The glass windows of the restaurant reflected the skyline behind me, beautiful, glittering, and completely hollow. I stood there for a moment, watching the cars move along the bridge, tiny lights crossing the river. From up there, the world probably looked peaceful. From down here, it just looked lonely. I thought of Richard, of the house we built together, of the life that used to be mine. I thought of Daniel's laugh when he was little, how he'd hold my hand crossing the street. Now he couldn't even look at me. I unlocked my car, sat behind the wheel, and took one deep breath before starting the engine. My reflection in the rear-view mirror looked older, yes, but there was something else there. Something calm. They thought tonight had humiliated me. They thought I'd leave feeling small, embarrassed, quiet. But humiliation can be funny. Sometimes it's just the last thing you feel before you stop caring what people think. As I drove away, I looked back one last time at the glowing windows of the Skyline Terrace. Vanessa's laughter floated faintly through the air before fading into the city noise. "Next time," I whispered to myself, "we'll see whose vibe this city really belongs to." The light turned green. I drove into the night, the city shining ahead, bright, loud, and empty. The rain started as I pulled into the driveway. It wasn't heavy, just that steady Portland drizzle that soaks everything without a sound. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the drops blur the windshield. My hands were still tight on the steering wheel. I could still hear Vanessa's voice in my head, light, cheerful, cruel. I turned off the engine and sat there, breathing. The lights from the street lamps reflected across the wet pavement, turning the city into one long shimmer of gold and gray. When I finally went upstairs, my shoes left small wet marks on the carpet. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I hung my coat, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table. That's when I saw the notification on my phone. Vanessa Blake, live replay, 120K views. I stared at it for a second. Then I opened my laptop. The thumbnail was her face, perfect under restaurant lights, smiling. Daniel was next to her, half in frame, looking like he wished he could disappear. I pressed play. There she was, laughing, moving the camera around the table. "Family dinner night," she said, keeping things classy. Then the shot turned toward me. "And this is my mother-in-law. She's our vintage charm tonight." The comment section was still active. "That poor old lady. How heartless. Why would she post that? The son looks embarrassed." I kept scrolling. Some defended her, of course, people always do. But the rest, they saw what it really was. Humiliation dressed up as humor. I sat back in my chair. The rain outside grew louder. For a long moment I didn't move. Then I reached over and turned on the small lamp beside me. The soft yellow light spread across the table, warm against the cold window. I saw my reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, but steady. "They think I'm weak," I whispered. "They've forgotten I used to teach rhetoric." The words felt strange on my tongue. I hadn't said them in years. Before Richard died, before Daniel drifted away, before I became the polite background in their perfect lives, I had stood in classrooms teaching young people how words could change everything, how a single sentence could build or destroy someone's world. I knew how power worked. I just stopped using it. Not anymore. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. The key to the safe was still in the small ceramic dish by the door, where it had always been. I opened the safe, the sound of metal clicking loud in the quiet room. Inside was a wooden box, old, smooth, and worn at the edges. Richard's box. I carried it to the table and sat down again. For a second, I just looked at it. Then I lifted the lid. The smell of paper and cedar hit me, familiar and sharp. Inside were letters, photographs, and a small stack of documents bound by a leather strap. The letters were in his handwriting, careful, neat, and always written in blue ink. The first one was dated the week before his heart attack. If they ever make you feel small, remember this. The story is still yours to write. I read it twice. Then again. The words felt heavier now, like they had been waiting for this exact night to find me. I looked through the rest of the papers, his old investment notes, the property deeds, account statements, everything I'd kept locked away, everything I'd never talked about. It wasn't about the money, it was about what it represented. Control, freedom, the right to make choices without anyone's permission. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the city. I didn't flinch. I closed the laptop, pushed it aside, and spread the papers across the table like a map of everything I'd forgotten I owned. I traced my finger along one of the deeds, the small rental property on Hawthorne, then another, the mutual funds, the savings account I hadn't touched since Richard passed. I realized then, I wasn't trapped in that small apartment. I wasn't dependent. I had simply been living as if I were. I leaned back in my chair, the sound of rain steady against the glass. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't care. I felt something inside me shift, quiet but certain. They thought I would fade away, that I'd stay quiet, that humiliation would shrink me, but all it did was wake me up. I turned the letter over, ran my fingers across Richard's signature. I could almost hear his voice, calm and certain. Eleanor, you were never the background. You were the story. The city lights outside flickered. I stood and walked to the window. The street below was empty except for the reflection of the traffic lights on the wet asphalt. Red, yellow, green, repeating like a heartbeat. In that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Tomorrow, I would go through every document properly. I would call Catherine, our old lawyer. I would make changes, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Out of peace. The story was mine again. I turned off the light, leaving only the glow of the desk lamp on the box. The rain softened, tapping lightly against the glass. The sound was almost soothing now. I whispered to the quiet room, You were wrong, Vanessa. I won't die poor, and I won't die alone. The lamp flickered once before steadying. I looked at the letter one last time. The story is still yours to write. I smiled. Then it's time to start writing again. The rain outside grew heavier, the city fading behind a curtain of silver, and in that small apartment with nothing but a lamp and a box of old papers, everything in my life began to change. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still looked gray. Portland always felt quieter after a storm, like the city had just confessed something and was waiting for forgiveness. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of strong coffee and the wooden box in front of me. I opened it again. This time slower, more deliberate. I went through every paper, every folder, every letter. One file was thicker than the rest. Northwind Books. I frowned. I hadn't thought about that name in years. Richard started it when Daniel was still in high school, a small publishing house that grew fast before he sold most of it to a larger group. I always thought he sold everything. But as I looked closer at the document, I realized he hadn't. He'd kept 14% of the company. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the current valuation printed at the bottom of the quarterly statement. $2.1 million. I put the paper down and just stared at it. $2 million. Sitting there, forgotten, all these years. I felt something strange, not excitement, not greed, but calm. Like the world had tilted just slightly back in my favor. They thought I was weak, old, irrelevant, but I was sitting on something they didn't even know existed. I folded the document carefully, placed it into my bag, and grabbed my coat. There was something I needed to see with my own eyes. The Northwind office was on 10th Avenue downtown. It used to be an old brick building with ivy on the walls, but now it had glass doors and a bright new logo. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute, watching people go in and out, young professionals with sleek laptops and coffee cups, moving fast, full of purpose. When I walked through the doors, the smell of fresh paper and coffee hit me instantly. The receptionist looked up. She couldn't have been older than 25. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked with a polite but distant smile. "Yes," I said. "I need to speak with someone in management about an ownership record." She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you delivering something?" I looked at her for a moment, then smiled. "Yes," I said softly. "Delivering something important. To myself." Her confusion was almost funny. She handed me a visitor badge and told me to wait. 10 minutes later, a familiar voice called from across the lobby. "Eleanor?" I turned. It was Hannah Lee. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp, warm, and steady. She'd been Richard's lawyer back in the day and later my friend. "Hannah?" I said, surprised. "You still work here?" She laughed. "Barely. I sit on the board now. What are you doing here?" "I think I own part of this place," I said, holding up the document. Her smile faded. "Come with me." We walked down a long hallway into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, shelves full of books, everything clean and bright. She closed the door behind us. "Let me see that," she said. I handed her the folder. She read through it quickly, her eyes narrowing as she turned each page. "You're right," she said finally. 14%, fully vested, never transferred. Richard must have intended to keep it for you." "For me," I repeated. She nodded. "Do you have any idea how valuable this is now?" "I do," I said. "I saw the numbers this morning." Hannah looked at me closely. "Eleanor, why are you looking at this now?" I paused, then told her everything. The dinner, the live stream, the comments, Vanessa's smirk, Daniel's silence. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You don't need to fight them," she said quietly. "You can outsmart them." I met her eyes. "Exactly what I planned to do." She smiled faintly. "You always were the calmest one in the room. I should have known you'd come here with a reason." I shrugged. "I'm tired of being polite." Hannah opened a drawer and took out a notepad. "If you're serious about changing things, we'll need to update your legal structure. Move the Northwind shares into a trust under your name only. Keep it out of your estate. That way, if your son ever tries to claim it later, he can't." "That's exactly what I want." She looked at me again, her tone softening. "Are you sure this isn't about revenge?" I thought about that for a moment. "It's about memory," I said. "They forgot who I was. I'm just reminding them." Hannah smiled. "Then let's remind them properly." She started typing. The sound of the keyboard filled the room. Steady, fast, final. I looked out the window. From the 12th floor, the city looked small. Cars moved like quiet lines of light. When she finished, she printed out a stack of papers and slid them across the desk. "This will secure everything. Sign here, here, and here." I took the pen and signed each line carefully. My hand didn't shake once. As she gathered the papers, Hannah said, "What will you do next?" I smiled. "Something they'll never expect." When I left the building, the air smelled cleaner somehow. The rain clouds had broken apart and the sun was pushing through. The streets were wet but shining. I stopped for a moment and looked back at the Northwind sign gleaming above the door. They thought they had all the power, but they forgot something. The woman they mocked still had her name on the door. It was a few days after I met with Hannah when I first noticed the girl from downstairs. She was sitting on the front steps of the building, her hair pulled back, wearing a nurse's uniform. She looked exhausted but still smiled when she saw me. "Morning, Mrs. Walker," she said, lifting her coffee cup like a small toast. "Good morning," I replied. "Heading to work?" She nodded. "Night shift. Again." Then she laughed, the kind of tired laugh that makes you want to sit beside someone even if you don't know them yet. Her name was Mia. 25, a nurse at the community hospital a few blocks away. She lived alone in the small apartment directly below mine. The first time she came by my door was because of my laptop. It had frozen again, probably another update I didn't understand. I was about to call the repair shop when she knocked. "Hi," she said, holding a small plate of cookies. "I baked too many. Thought you might like some." That's how it started. When I told her about the laptop, she offered to help. She sat on the couch, typing quickly, focused. "You just needed a restart," she said, smiling. "Machines get tired too." "Don't we all?" I replied. From that day, she stopped knocking like a guest. She just called out from the hallway, "It's me," and came in with something, a pastry, a cup of coffee, or sometimes just a story from her long night shifts. She had a way of talking that made silence feel comfortable. Some evenings we'd sit together, the TV on, but no one really watching, just sharing the kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. One night she told me about her mother. We were sitting by the window. Rain again, soft, steady, the kind that makes the world sound smaller. Mia had just finished washing the dishes when she sat down, her face different, heavier somehow. My mom used to be a nurse too, she said quietly. She loved her job. But when she got married, her husband's family didn't want her to work anymore, said it was embarrassing. I didn't interrupt. She stayed home for years, tried to be what they wanted. My dad's mother was cruel to her, always told her she wasn't good enough. Eventually, she stopped talking much, just kind of disappeared even when she was still there. She looked out the window, the streetlights blurred against the rain. When I was 17, she took too many pills one night. They said it was an accident. Mia swallowed hard, but I knew it wasn't. The room went quiet. The clock ticked. Somewhere downstairs, a door closed softly. I reached for the teapot and poured her another cup. My hands didn't shake. "I'm sorry," I said. "No one deserves to be treated like that." She gave a small laugh. "You sound like her?" She used to say that all the time. Then she'd smile like she didn't believe it anymore. I looked at her, this young woman, all light and kindness, carrying pain, too old for her age. I wanted to tell her everything about my own son, my daughter-in-law, the dinner, the live stream, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I said, "We're not born to be saints, but no woman deserves to fade into someone else's shadow." Mia looked up at me. There was something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "You really believe that?" she asked. "I didn't," I said. "Not for a long time, but I do now." She nodded slowly, as if she was memorizing the moment. That night when she left, she hugged me without asking. It was quick, almost awkward, but real. I hadn't been hugged like that in years. After she went downstairs, I stood by the window and watched the lights in her apartment come on. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone. In the days that followed, Mia stopped by more often. Sometimes before her shifts, sometimes after. She brought leftover hospital muffins or her mother's old recipes she was trying to perfect. We talked about everything. Books, food, old music, even the future. She told me she was saving up to go back to school, maybe to become a nurse practitioner. "It's what Mom wanted," she said one night, smiling softly. I told her she'd make her mother proud, and she told me something I didn't expect. "You remind me of her sometimes. The way you talk, the way you look when you're thinking." That stayed with me. There's a kind of healing that doesn't happen in hospitals. It happens quietly between people who find each other when they both need it most. For me, Mia was that person. A reminder that kindness doesn't always come from family, and love doesn't always have to be inherited. That night, as she waved from the stairs and disappeared into her apartment below, I stood in the doorway for a while. The building was silent, but the warmth lingered. I looked at Richard's photo on the shelf and whispered, "Looks like I found a new reason to stay awake again." For the first time in months, I went to bed with a smile. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was something stronger. Hope. And from the floor below, I could hear faint music playing, a song about second chances. I closed my eyes and listened. Sometimes, family finds you when you stop waiting for it. The next week, I went back to Hannah's office. The air in the building felt colder this time. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was because I finally knew what I was there to do. The elevator doors opened to that quiet corporate hum. Soft voices, clicking keyboards, shoes on marble floors. Hannah's assistant greeted me with a polite smile. "She's expecting you, Mrs. Walker." Hannah's office looked exactly as I remembered. All glass and steel, the kind of place that made you speak softer than you planned. The city stretched behind her, gray and wide, reflected in the spotless window. She stood up when I walked in. "Eleanor," she said, smiling faintly, "you look determined." "I am." We sat down across from each other. She folded her hands, studying me carefully. "So, what did you decide?" I took the folder from my bag and placed it on her desk. "I want to transfer everything." "Everything?" she repeated. I nodded. "All of it. The Northwind shares, the accounts, the property. I want it out of my personal name." Her brow furrowed slightly. "And where do you want it to go?" I looked out the window for a moment. The clouds were low, brushing the tops of buildings. My reflection looked older, but also clearer. "To a foundation," I said. "One that helps women my age. Women who've been left behind, ignored, or forgotten. Call it the Walker Fund. Hannah leaned back in her chair, silent for a moment. That's a bold move. It's the right one. She hesitated. You know Daniel will contest this. He'll fight it. Then he'll have to stand in court, I said quietly, without my heart beside him. For a second she just looked at me. Then she nodded slowly. You've made up your mind. Yes. She opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of legal documents, and set them neatly between us. This will take effect immediately after you sign. It'll protect the assets from any external claim. The foundation will hold them under independent trusteeship. No one, not even Daniel, will be able to touch it. That's what I want, I said. Eleanor. She paused, her voice softer now. Once this is done, there's no undoing it. You'll be walking away from everything that connects you to them financially. I already walked away emotionally years ago, I said. This is just catching up on paper. Hannah gave a small, almost sad smile. You sound like Richard. I wish he were here to see this. She opened her pen, slid the first document toward me. Then let's make it official. The sound of the pen against paper was louder than I expected. Each signature felt final, clean, like shutting a door that had been open too long. Hannah moved each page aside, efficient, steady. The clock on the wall ticked softly. When I reached the last page, she looked up. This one makes it irrevocable. I understand. Are you sure? I met her eyes. Completely. I signed. For a long moment after, neither of us spoke. The paper sat between us like something sacred. Outside, the light shifted, a slow patch of sun breaking through the clouds, spilling across the floor. Hannah gathered the documents carefully, sliding them into a folder embossed with my name. I'll have the board process the transfer this week, she said. You'll get the confirmation letter soon. The Walker Fund will officially exist by Friday. I nodded. Good. She leaned back, exhaling. You know, most people your age talk about retirement. You're talking about building a legacy. I smiled slightly. Maybe it's the same thing. Just depends what you're retiring from. She laughed quietly. Then, after a pause, her voice softened again. Do you feel lighter? I looked down at the empty space in front of me where the papers had been. My hands were still on the desk, calm, steady. No, I said after a moment. Just ready. She nodded once, as if she understood exactly what that meant. When I left her office, the hallway felt warmer than before. The afternoon light hit the glass walls, making them glow. I walked past people talking on phones, rushing to meetings, chasing things that suddenly felt so small. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face looked the same, but something in my eyes had changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was focus. When the doors opened to the lobby, I stepped out, calm and certain. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and cold air. The city stretched ahead, tall, sharp, and shining under the thin sun. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking home. I was walking toward something. It took almost 2 hours to drive from Portland to Hood River. The rain had stopped and the sky was finally clear, pale blue stretching above the highway. I kept the window slightly open. The air smelled clean, pine, damp earth, and something softer, almost like freedom. When I turned off the main road, the GPS led me down a narrow path lined with tall cedar trees. At the end of it, sitting quietly by the edge of the lake, was the house. It wasn't big. Just an old wooden cabin, 2 floors, with paint that had faded into a soft gray, but it faced the water directly. From the porch, you could see the entire lake, still, wide, and framed by mountains in the distance. I parked the car and stepped out. The sound of gravel under my shoes was the only thing breaking the silence. The realtor, a young woman in a brown coat, waved from the porch. Mrs. Walker, you found it okay? I did, I said. It's quieter than I expected. That's what people like about it, she replied. No traffic, no neighbors for miles, just the view. We walked inside. The door creaked softly. Dust hung in the sunlight coming through the tall windows. The air smelled like old wood and rain. Every sound seemed to echo gently, like the house had been waiting a long time to be heard again. The living room had a stone fireplace, still black from old fires. There was a long window facing the lake. The light hit the water and bounced back through the glass, washing the walls in gold. I stood there for a moment, saying nothing. The realtor started describing details like square footage, foundation, repairs, but I wasn't listening. I ran my hand along the wooden frame of the window. The surface was rough but warm. A house that listens, I said quietly. I could live here. She smiled politely, not quite understanding. Would you like to see upstairs? We went up the narrow staircase. 2 bedrooms, both small. One had a view of the lake, the other faced the woods. There was a faint scent of cedar in the air. In the larger room, I could still see old nail holes where pictures once hung. I thought about Richard for a moment, about the plans we used to make, the trips we never took. And then I thought about Daniel and Vanessa, and how far they felt now, not in miles, but in meaning. The realtor handed me a folder. The cellar's flexible. The place needs work, but it's structurally sound. You could make it beautiful again. I looked out the window one more time. The surface of the lake was calm, almost glassy. A few leaves drifted across it slowly. The quiet wasn't empty, and it was steady, like the pause between 2 breaths. I'll take it, I said. She blinked. You're sure? You haven't even... I'm sure, I interrupted gently. We went back downstairs. She called the office to prepare the paperwork, her voice quick and cheerful. I sat by the window, watching the light shift across the water. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was arriving. When Hannah called later that afternoon, her voice came through, warm but cautious. You didn't tell me you were driving out of town today? I needed some air, I said. I heard from the realtor's office, she said. You're buying property in Hood River? Yes. There was a pause. Why there? I looked out at the lake again, the sunlight turning the surface into a sheet of silver. Because calm waters hide the deepest currents. Hannah laughed softly. I should have known better than to ask. It's not a secret, I said. It's just time I built something that's mine again. Well, she said, her tone turning gentle. Congratulations, Eleanor. You deserve it. After the call, I stayed a little longer, walking through the rooms again. Slowly this time, touching the walls, the doors, the empty shelves. There was a peace in it, a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. By sunset, the paperwork was done. I signed the documents while the realtor packed up her briefcase. You can move in any time, she said. Would you like us to send someone to clean first? No, I said, I'll do it myself. When she drove away, the sound of her car faded until there was nothing left but the soft wind through the trees. I stood on the porch, looking out at the lake. The last light of the day stretched across the water, gold fading into silver. I whispered to no one in particular. Welcome home. Vanessa sat in a bright cafe, phone in hand, surrounded by her friends. Her nails were perfect, her laughter rehearsed. Oh, you'll love this, she said, scrolling through her messages. My mother-in-law finally bought a place. Really? One of them asked. Where? Hood River, Vanessa said, smirking. Some old cabin by a lake. Cute, right? We'll redo it, make it Instagram-worthy, maybe a little grandma chic retreat vibe. Her friends laughed. One leaned closer. That's actually kind of brilliant. You could film the remodel, call it From Old to Bold. Vanessa laughed louder. Exactly. She finally did something right. I'll handle the rest. She didn't notice the message below, the one from a business journalist who had just emailed her husband. Subject: The Walker Fund makes major move. Founder Eleanor Walker purchases property linked to Women's Initiative launch, but she would. Soon. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the car. The tires rolled over the gravel, slow and deliberate. I didn't need to look outside to know who it was. Only one person I knew would honk twice. Cheerful, rehearsed, fake. I was in the kitchen pouring tea when the doorbell rang. Before I could reach the handle, I heard her voice already calling out. Mrs. Walker, are you ready for your visitors? Vanessa. The door opened before I could answer. She stepped inside, camera already in hand, the red light blinking. She turned to Daniel, who was carrying a bouquet of white flowers. Lilies, too formal, too safe. Smile, babe, she said. We're doing a quick live, just showing everyone that family still means something. He forced a small smile. Vanessa, maybe we shouldn't... But she was already talking to her phone. This, she said, sweeping the camera around the room, is what retirement goals look like, everyone. Look at this view. Lakefront, peaceful, elegant. My mother-in-law really nailed it this time. Her tone was sugar, but her eyes were scanning everything. The furniture, the walls, the quiet order of my life. She wasn't admiring, she was assessing. I stood by the counter, calm, steady. Would you like some tea? I asked. Oh, that would be lovely, she said without looking at me, still smiling at her viewers. I poured tea into 3 cups and set them on the small table by the window. Daniel followed, careful not to touch anything. He sat first. Vanessa positioned her phone to get the lake view behind us. Perfect, she murmured, adjusting her hair. Then, as soon as the camera was off, her smile dropped. So, she said lightly, I heard from a journalist that you've been busy. Something about a foundation? Daniel glanced at me quickly. Vanessa, he muttered, warning in his voice. She ignored him. It's all over social media, actually. The Walker Fund. Sounds important. Must have taken a lot of resources. I sipped my tea. It did. She tilted her head. You could have told us, you know. Family should be part of these things. Family, I repeated quietly. That's an interesting word coming from you. The silence that followed was sharp. Daniel shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. Mom, he said softly, we're proud of you. Really. What you've done, it's incredible. Thank you, I said. I didn't do it for recognition. Vanessa smiled again, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Of course not. Still, with a place like this and all that money moving around, you'll need help managing things. It's a lot for one person. I manage fine. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know, if you ever feel overwhelmed, we could move in for a while. Help with the house, handle errands. It would be family time. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. Even he knew how false it sounded. I set my teacup down carefully, the sound crisp against the wood. That's generous, I said, meeting her gaze. But this house already has all the peace it needs. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, the wind moved across the lake, bending the trees. Inside, everything was still. Vanessa's smile twitched just a little. Peace is nice, she said finally, but it gets lonely, doesn't it? I looked at her, really looked. The flawless makeup, the carefully curled hair, the phone still glowing beside her cup. A world built on noise. Not when you've learned the difference between company and peace, I said. Daniel exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. Can we not do this, please? I came here to make things right. I turned to him. And what does that mean, Daniel? He hesitated. It means, we miss you. I miss you. The words might have meant something once, but now they sounded like a script. Something practiced, something rehearsed. I'm sure you do, I said softly, but missing someone isn't the same as knowing them. Vanessa looked between us, eyes narrowing slightly. You're angry, she said, her tone almost triumphant. You're still angry about what I said months ago. The dinner, the live stream, you can't let it go. I smiled faintly. You mistake silence for resentment. I'm not angry. I just learned to stop waiting for decency. Her phone buzzed on the table, a notification. She glanced down, and I saw the flash of irritation in her face. Probably another comment from her followers, another life she was too busy performing. Anyway, she said, standing abruptly, we should get going. Long drive back. Daniel stood too, still looking like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. At the door, she turned back. You know, you could have been part of something bigger. You had the money, the name, the platform. We could have made it beautiful, something people would actually notice. I looked past her, at the lake outside the window, the reflection of light dancing on the surface. Some things aren't meant to be noticed, I said. They're meant to be lived. She frowned, not understanding. Daniel gave me a small nod, half apology, half surrender. They stepped outside. Vanessa lifted her phone again, her voice bright. Say bye to my amazing mother-in-law, everyone. She's the definition of graceful aging. I stood by the door, saying nothing, the faintest smile on my lips. The moment the car drove away, the house went quiet again. The tea had gone cold. The sunlight had shifted, and for the first time since they arrived, I could breathe. I walked to the window, looking out at the water. The reflection of clouds rippled with the wind. The camera light was gone. The laughter had faded, and in the silence that followed, there was only the sound of the wind moving softly through the glass, like peace exhaling. It started as a quiet afternoon. The lake was still. The house smelled like chamomile and old wood. I had set the table for tea, not because I wanted company, but because I knew they were coming. Daniel had texted that morning. We'd love to visit again, Mom, Vanessa insists. Of course she did. By the time their car pulled into the driveway, the kettle had just begun to whistle. I poured the hot water over the tea leaves, letting the steam rise in slow curls. The door opened and Vanessa's voice filled the house before her footsteps even crossed the threshold. There she is, she sang, stepping inside in her designer boots. I told Daniel we have to come see how she's settling in. This place is just too perfect to waste on quiet mornings. Daniel followed, carrying a box of pastries. He looked tired, already defeated. Mom, he said softly, the house looks amazing. Thank you, I replied. It feels peaceful. Vanessa smiled tightly. Peaceful, yes, but also full of potential. We were just talking on the drive here. She turned to Daniel, who looked instantly nervous. Tell her? He hesitated. We think, she corrected, that this could be our family's summer home. She said it casually, like she was offering to redecorate a spare room. We could make it modern, but cozy. Add a deck, maybe an outdoor bar. You'd love it, Mrs. Walker. You'd have the kids running around, laughter everywhere. Finally, a home that brings us together. I didn't answer. I just poured the tea. The sound of the liquid hitting the cups was the only thing in the room. Daniel tried again, softer. It's just an idea, Mom. We want to be closer to you. Vanessa leaned forward, smiling sweetly. And let's be honest, it's a big house for one person. Wouldn't it feel good to have it filled with family? To see life in these rooms again? Her words were honeyed poison, each syllable polite, each one meant to claim. I looked down at my cup. The reflection of the light trembled in the tea. Then, slowly, I reached for my phone on the table. Hannah had told me it would only take one call. I pressed the speed dial. Hannah Pierce, came her voice through the speaker. Hannah, I said, steady and clear. Proceed with the public filing. There was a pause on the other end. Then, understood. I'll notify the board immediately. I ended the call and set the phone down. When I looked up, Vanessa was staring at me, confusion flickering into irritation. What was that? She asked. I smiled gently. Just business. Business? She repeated. Since when do you have... This house, I said quietly, isn't mine anymore. Her smile faltered. Excuse me? It belongs to the Walker Foundation for Aging Women. As of this morning, the transfer is complete. For a moment, the words didn't seem to land. They just hung in the air between us. Then, slowly, Vanessa's expression shifted from disbelief to fury. Daniel's brows drew together. Mom, what are you talking about? I took a slow breath. I'm just giving the world what my husband left me. Wisdom and choice. Two things I nearly forgot I had. Vanessa laughed once, sharp, cold. You're joking? I'm not. She stood abruptly. You can't just give away property like this. You don't even understand how... I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You see, Vanessa, when someone spends enough time being spoken over, they learn to listen differently. To everything, including themselves. Daniel looked between us, his voice trembling. Mom, you didn't even tell me. You stopped asking, I said softly. The air in the room changed, heavy, electric. The quiet wasn't peace anymore. It was pressure. Vanessa's hand clenched around her teacup. This is insane. You think this makes you noble, giving everything away to strangers? They're not strangers, I said. They're women like me. Women who gave everything and were left with nothing but silence. You're delusional, she snapped. You think the world cares about your sad little story? You think this house, this fund, will make you a hero? I stood then, slowly, calmly. No, I don't need to be a hero. I just need to stop being your project. That was when it happened. Vanessa slammed the cup down. Hard. The porcelain cracked and the tea splashed across the table, amber drops scattering like blood under the afternoon light. The sound echoed through the room. Daniel froze. No one moved. The tea ran in small rivers down the wood, dripping onto the floor. For a long moment there was no sound but the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Vanessa whispered, low and furious, You'll regret this. I met her eyes. I already regretted everything that came before. Daniel stood, reaching for her arm. Vanessa, enough. She pulled away. No, she needs to hear this. You're old, Eleanor, alone, and when you die, no one will even remember you. I didn't flinch. I just turned back to the window. The lake outside had gone still again, the surface unbroken. That's the beauty of legacy, I said quietly. It doesn't need to be remembered to matter. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You're pathetic. Daniel spoke, almost whispering. Let's go. She hesitated, then stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. Daniel followed, stopping at the doorway. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Why are you doing this? I didn't look at him. Because you still think everything I do is about you. He had no answer. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the silence, watching the spilled tea dry into dark stains on the wood. The house was quiet again, but the quiet felt different, not fragile, not sad. Final. Outside, the wind rose suddenly, sweeping across the lake. The surface rippled, glinting under the sun like something alive. Inside, the clock kept ticking, and then nothing but the sound of the wind through the glass. The tea had gone cold. The storm had already passed outside, but inside the house something else was building, heavier, sharper. Vanessa was pacing by the window, her phone still in her hand, the camera light blinking. Daniel stood near the table, pale, silent, trying to hold the air together. I stayed seated, calm, both hands resting on my knees. Then Vanessa turned on me. Her voice cracked. You tricked us? She shouted. You made us look like fools. Daniel flinched. Vanessa, please. No, she snapped. You told us this house was yours. You made us think. I stood slowly, meeting her eyes. I never said it was yours. She stepped closer. You knew what we thought. You wanted this. To embarrass us. To ruin everything I've built. I could see her chest rising and falling too fast. The way people breathe when they realize the power they had is gone. Daniel tried again, voice breaking. Mom, you can't. I can, I said, and I just did. The words came out quiet but clean. They cut through her, shouting like a blade through fabric. For a second, there was no sound. Only the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the camera light still glowing in Vanessa's trembling hand. Then she screamed. Not words this time, just sound. A raw, furious sound that had nothing left to hide behind. She threw the phone. It hit the wall, bounced onto the table, and slid to the floor. The screen stayed on. The red light blinked. She hadn't turned off the stream. The live stream was still running. On the screen, my face appeared. Calm, still, framed by the lake behind me. Her voice echoed in the background, distorted, wild. I watched her realize it. The blood drained from her face. She dropped to her knees, grabbing the phone. Oh, no, she whispered. No, no, no. Her fingers fumbled with the screen, trying to stop it. But it was too late. The comments were already flooding in. Wait, is this live? She's screaming at her own mother-in-law? That poor woman. Look how calm she is. This is disgusting. I used to follow her. Unsubscribe. Vanessa's breath hitched. She looked up at me like a cornered animal. You, she gasped. You ruined me. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. Daniel bent down, turning off the phone. His hands were shaking. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Vanessa sank into a chair, her hair falling loose, her eyes blank. They're watching, she said. They're all watching. I can't. Daniel whispered, It's okay. We'll fix it. She looked at him with something close to panic. No, we won't. You don't understand. They'll destroy me. He said nothing, because deep down, he knew it was true. I picked up the shards of the broken teacup from the floor, one by one. My hands didn't shake. When pride burns, I said quietly, truth survives. Vanessa lifted her head. Her face was wet with tears and rage. You think you won? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Outside, the clouds shifted and light broke through. Soft, white, pouring through the window. The lake glimmered again, bright as glass. Daniel stood motionless, staring at the light, at me, at everything collapsing around him. Mom, he said finally, voice trembling, please, stop, please. I turned toward him, my tone calm but steady. I stopped years ago, Daniel. You just didn't notice. He blinked hard, tears forming. For a second he looked like the boy he used to be, lost, scared, too small for the world around him. Vanessa pressed her hands against her face, whispering under her breath, "They're going to hate me. They're going to hate me." No one answered. The house had gone utterly still again, but not peaceful this time. It was the stillness after something irreversible. I walked to the window. The light was so bright it almost hurt to look at. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass, older, steadier, finally whole. Behind me, I heard Daniel whisper, "What happens now?" Without turning, I said, "Now, the truth stays where it belongs, out in the open." He didn't reply. The last sound before the scene faded was the faint buzz of the phone still lighting up on the table. Notifications, hundreds of them, rolling in faster and faster. I can't believe she talked to her like that. The old lady's a queen. This is what karma looks like. Vanessa's world was unraveling, while live in real time. I took one last look at the lake, the reflection of the sky spreading across it in perfect silence. Then I turned away. The light followed me, white and soft through the window, filling the room until it swallowed the sound completely. It had been a week since the outburst. The video was still circulating online, though quieter now. The world had moved on, as it always does, but the silence it left behind was different. Not empty, just honest. The lake house was calm again. The mornings came slower. The light fell softer through the curtains. I woke up early that day. The air smelled of rain and cedar. Mia had stopped by the night before with soup and fresh bread, leaving them on the porch with a note that said, "Rest, you did the right thing." I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt finished. Hannah arrived around noon. She didn't knock. She never did anymore. She carried a brown envelope under her arm and a familiar look on her face, the kind you wear when you're bringing closure to someone else's story. She set the envelope down on the table. "It's official," she said. "The board signed everything. The Walker Foundation is now fully operational." I smiled faintly. "Good." She hesitated. "There's more. I brought a certified copy of your will, the one you updated before all this began." I nodded slowly. "Keep one copy here," I said. "Burn the other." She smiled, soft and sad. "You always did like final gestures." "I like peace," I said, "and paper doesn't hold love. People do." When she left, the rain had started again, thin, steady, tapping against the glass. I sat by the window with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. It was time to write to Daniel. The letter. "Daniel, if this reaches you, it means you've started asking questions again. That's good. It means you're still capable of seeing past the noise. I want you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to stop pretending. Pretending that silence was love. Pretending that obedience was respect. Pretending that endurance was strength. Love isn't inherited, Daniel. It's chosen, every single day. Chosen when it's hard, when it costs you pride, when you have to face the parts of yourself you taught to stay quiet. Your father used to say legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you teach others to carry differently. I think I finally understand that now. You still have a chance to be better than we were. Not richer, not louder, just kinder. If one day you bring your children here, I hope they see more than the walls and the water. I hope they see the lesson that built it. This house isn't a victory. It's a reminder. Be gentle with what remains of us. Mom. I folded the letter carefully and sealed it in an envelope. On the front, I wrote his name, nothing else. No address, no date, just Daniel. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The sound filled the house like a song with no melody. I placed the letter on the mantel beside Richard's old photo. He was smiling in that picture. Not the forced kind, but the quiet kind, the one that said he knew things took time to make sense. I whispered, "It's done." Daniel drove through the city, rain streaking across the windshield in gray lines. He hadn't spoken to Vanessa in days. The followers were gone, the sponsorships canceled. The house they shared felt like a museum of noise. The only thing left was the sound of the wipers and the road ahead. He pulled over near the old bridge, the one his father used to take him to when he was a boy. He sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the water below. It was the same kind of rain that used to fall on their porch back home, soft, unhurried. He remembered his mother's voice reading to him, her hand steady even when everything else was breaking. He hadn't understood her then. Maybe he never fully would, but somewhere between the noise of the storm and the rhythm of his heartbeat, something inside him shifted. Small, almost imperceptible. He didn't feel angry anymore. Just awake. He whispered, I'm sorry, though no one could hear him. The rain washed down harder. He closed his eyes and let it. Back at the lake house, I sat by the window watching the same rain fall. It looked softer from here, almost kind. The world outside was still gray, but the water was calm. I reached for my tea, took a sip, and let the warmth settle in. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing against my chest. Hannah's car was long gone. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of peace. Outside, the wind carried ripples across the lake, small circles spreading wider and wider until they disappeared into stillness. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like letting the rain fall and not needing to hide anymore. 6 months later, the lake looked different. The ice had melted weeks ago and the water was clear again, moving softly in the wind. Spring had arrived, quiet but certain, as if it knew exactly where it belonged. The garden behind the lake house had come alive. Tulips, wild daisies, and white lilies filled the air with color. The same patch of earth that once looked tired now shimmered with sunlight. I stood by the porch, arranging the last few chairs under the awning. The new sign out front read, "Writing our names back, free classes for women 50 plus. It still felt strange to see it. My handwriting on a wooden board facing the world. Mia came out from the kitchen holding a stack of notebooks and a tray of lemon tea. She wore her hair up, her face glowing with the ease of someone who'd learned to rest without guilt. "They say peace looks boring," she said, setting the tray down, "but it's breathtaking up close." I smiled. "It's even better when it's shared." She laughed. "The first class is already full. You might have started a movement." "Maybe," I said, arranging the pens on the table. "Or maybe women just needed a place to hear their own voices again." The breeze carried the scent of wet soil and blooming flowers. The sound of birds filled the spaces that used to hold silence. For the first time in years, the house felt like it was breathing. That afternoon, while Mia was fixing the projector, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. It wasn't loud, but it was familiar. I turned toward the road and saw a car pulling in, an old sedan, clean but worn. The door opened slowly. Daniel stepped out, holding a white orchid in a small clay pot. He looked older than I remembered, not in years, but in expression. His shoulders seemed lighter, as if he'd stopped carrying something invisible. He stood by the gate for a moment, unsure whether to walk in. Then he did. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Daniel." He looked around. "It's beautiful here." "It took time," I said, "but most things worth keeping do." He nodded. The silence between us wasn't heavy this time, just quiet. He set the orchid down on the table beside me. "I didn't come for money," he said. "I came to listen." I looked at him for a long moment. His voice wasn't defensive or desperate anymore. It was honest, the way a boy speaks before the world teaches him to hide. "Then listen well," I said, "and start writing your own ending." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I will." We stood there for a while, saying nothing. The lake shimmered behind us, the reflection of clouds moving like slow dreams. After a while, I handed him a small trowel. "You can help me plant this," I said, pointing to the orchid. He laughed softly. "I don't think I'm dressed for gardening." "No one ever is," I said. We knelt side by side, digging a small hole by the edge of the porch. The soil was cool and damp. As he placed the orchid in, I held it steady, pressing the dirt gently around its roots. The petals caught the sunlight white against the brown earth. It looked fragile, but it stood tall. Mia came out quietly, watching from the doorway. She didn't say anything, just smiled. The camera could have caught it all, the garden, the lake, the light, but for once no one was filming. This was for us. When we finished, Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans. "You always liked orchids," he said. "They remind me of patience," I replied. "They bloom when they're ready, not when they're told." He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Understanding. The wind picked up, carrying petals from the trees across the water. They floated like quiet confessions, disappearing into the ripples. I turned to him and said, You should visit when the next class starts. Maybe help me read the essays." He smiled. "I'd like that." "Good," I said. "Just don't correct their grammar." He laughed, the kind of laugh that heals something you didn't realize was still broken. As the afternoon faded into gold, the light stretched across the lake, soft and endless. Mia set the last teacup down, and Daniel sat beside her, both of them watching the water. The three of us stayed like that for a long time. No words, no noise, just the rhythm of wind and sunlight and something close to peace. The camera of the world pulled back slowly, past the porch, past the garden, until the house became a small reflection on the glassy surface of the lake. The orchid's white petals caught the sun, glowing like a small promise, and in that golden light everything, the pain, the pride, the silence, seemed to dissolve into something softer.